that's a scary one. Hey, how about a story? All right, this is going to be a quiet, tender moment. It's a story called The Revolution. Some of you were there in the 60s. And we always knew the revolution was coming, but we never thought about like the day after the revolution. And this is a story about the day after. It seemed within reach. It seemed to be just over the next rise, a mist or fog that would settle among the trees and ragged bushes that lined the footpath that ran between the milkweed and black raspberry canes and sumac and tall golden grasses. Because that's how we imagined it, like a mist that settled down over us. No guns, no fighting, no shouting, just a mist settling down and softening the edges of things so that nothing, it would seem, needed to be done. Of course, we had been smoking weed in a tent erected for that purpose, and of course, a local rock band was churning away on the makeshift stage, and of course, there were frisbees flying everywhere, and circles of shirtless young men flipping a bean-filled sack into the air with their feet or catching it on the backs of their necks briefly. And of course, the 3-day concert had entered the third day, and someone's cousin was ripping along the trails on a Yamaha 175 that sounded like a drunken chainsaw spinning in the dirt. And the revolution was right there in front of us. The revolution that would make work and strife vanish. The revolution that would free us to sit cross-legged in a tent and smoke weed all day in a tent erected for that purpose in a park that was always open and waiting. And when we got hungry, a large converted mobile home would pull up, and people with hairnets would serve us food that the government provided. Something exotic, perhaps mangoes and black beans wrapped in a tortilla, a bottle of guava juice. We would line up and receive our revolutionary food, then go back to singing about the joys of the revolution, how everything was okay now. The song would be called OK Revolution, and it would have a loping reggae beat, and our voices would have been much improved by the revolution. There would be not much to say about the particular character of this particular revolution, but the song would assert over and over that the revolution was indeed okay. Some of us would clap along, others would strum guitars, all of us would sing a little in our new improved voices. Mornings we would stand and salute the sun, each in our own way. We would open beers or light up more joints and smoke. We would await the white mobile home-style kitchen on wheels, the women in their white hairnets and cheerful post-revolutionary voices. Afternoons we would talk about Dylan and Marley, and someone might venture a thought or two about Nietzsche. Inevitably somebody would say God is dead, and we would nod our assent. Then a band would begin playing a song we'd heard 1,000,000 times, a song that expressed the freedoms we were feeling now that the revolution had settled over us and made things mellow. Though the words might be different each time, the message was the same. Everything's mellow now that the revolution's here. It's true that squabbles would erupt occasionally. Someone might complain that someone ripped him off. A dreadlocked man might stand suddenly and barrel off into the bushes off kilter and lean out ahead of his legs like a wounded duck. Or a woman might pull off her shirt suddenly and cause much chest thumping and howling among the otherwise mellow young men. But most of the time, the revolution would deliver on its promise. So when it was time to dig a new latrine, all of the occupants of the tent would shake themselves out of their post-revolutionary stupor and help dig. Or when the food wagon came, we would be polite and patient and courteous in our lines. Marx had, it seemed, most days been mostly right. We were better people without property. Instead of 20 private stashes, each zealously guarded, now there was a pile of community weed that everyone dug into whenever the whim struck, and it struck often after the revolution. At first, we could think of nothing else to do except smoke weed and sing OK Revolution all day. Then one day, one of the men discovered a worn football on the bike path that ran alongside the river. At first, it sat beside the tent untouched. Then gradually, a few of the men started tossing it playfully around the circle while we sang our 445th chorus of OK Revolution. Then a few men tried a scrimmage, 2 on 2. Then one man throwing and the other catching and the other 2 trying to prevent the catch. Soon all of the men from our tent and the other men from the other tents began to join them. They moved the games to a field beside the river, away from the tents and the prying eyes of the women. The games became rougher, with men flinging each other in the dirt, then leaning and slapping each other in celebration. Soon they were growling and shouting so loudly that the women couldn't focus on their own thin voices singing "OK Revolution" beside the tent mouth. Eventually the women were drawn to see what was happening. They gathered on the ridge above the field and watched the men, some of them shirtless, others wearing their thin T-shirts drenched with sweat as they slammed into each other and galloped down the field, carrying the football tucked into their elbows, or squared off to contest a play, shoving each other and screaming just inches from each other's face. The women watched a while, then returned to the tent to sing and smoke and sleep. The men returned ravenous, filled with energy. They carried the women off into the bushes and lifted their peasant dresses and took them from behind. Some of the women were appalled, others secretly thrilled, but they all understood that things had changed. The men no longer sang "OK Revolution." They stopped smoking weed. When the food wagon came, the men fought to be first in line. They gobbled their food and wiped their mouths with their sleeves, then hurried off to practice handing the football to their teammates, tossing and catching. They thought of new ways to hit each other, lower and harder. They made plans for who would hit whom, figured out who would throw, who would catch, how they would trick the other teams by pretending to do one thing while doing another. They named captains, set up positions and strategies and assignments, and the women, the beautiful, peaceful women, gradually, 2 by 2 or in small groups, carrying sacks filled with their clothing and jewelry, their long skirts billowing, disappeared from the tent and the park until one day the park was filled with men standing in the dusk on the field, men scratching plays into the dirt with sticks, men hurtling through the near dark, slamming their bodies into each other, hitting and driving and leaping and rolling, shouting and pointing, men together with other men, happy and wild and sweat-drenched and lost. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I feel like Garrison Keillor now.